All right, let's talk Dallas Cowboys. I'm Nick, and this is our daily Cowboy show. How we feeling this morning? Of course, that was a heart-pounding victory over the New York Giants. Found a way to get it done. A gutsy performance from Dallas. Not a perfect performance. In fact, a very, very, very flawed performance. But they found a way to get a win. But already the Cowboys are already making a couple moves. I think two in particular that really stood out. One got some attention, one not so much, that I think the Cowboys are really hoping will fix some things going forward. Let's get into the first report here, and I think this is sort of an under-the-radar comment made post-game that I think speaks volumes about what's coming for Dallas. This is courtesy of John Machota over at The Athletic. He said Cowboys coach Brian Schottenheimer was speaking highly about Dallas's win, but then adds, quoting him directly now I think we did some stupid shit tonight. All right, so when you look at Schottenheimer's comments, obviously got his first win. It was a big emotional, locker room, all that kind of stuff. And, it was an emotional game. It was a crazy performance, a very, very slow start. Dallas kind of took control, second half of the second quarter, in the third quarter into the fourth, and then just became a crazy fourth quarter, just back and forth. And, of course, a million defensive issues in the coverage department. And I think what we're seeing from Schottenheimer here is this. Now, when he said, I think we did some stupid crap tonight, I think this is really a public statement more at Eberflus and the defensive staff. I think that's what this is. Look, when I played college football FCS level, for anyone who's not familiar with this, it's a small time. I'm not trying to brag here, but my point is, right after the game, I always felt the head coach's comments were always more directed to his staff. Right, the coordinators, the assistant, the position coaches, right? Because the head coach and his staff and all the coaches haven't had a chance to watch the film yet, right? There isn't something, unless it's something glaringly obvious, like a drop pass or a missed kick or a questionable penalty. The head coach hasn't had a chance to, evaluate the nitnoid of the film yet. And at this point, I think Schottenheimer, just from a high-level macro perspective, looked at the defensive strategy and said, I think we're doing a lot of dumb stuff, defensive strategy and defensive execution. I think, obviously, that's a fair assessment to make. And I'm not saying he's saying the defense was the only people that did dumb stuff. I think there's a lot of, flaws in the Cowboys game in special teams, numerous penalties on special teams, way too many there. Some questionable calls on offense as well against Dallas, especially that Pickens offensive pass interference. But there was some penalties on offense as well. So I don't think he's putting the concern completely on the defense and the defensive staff, but I think this is a message to Eberflus. It says, listen, man, you got to come up with a better game plan. You got to come up with a better counter. Right, we got to have a better strategy in place, because whatever strategy that was, it clearly didn't work. And I think this is a move of Schottenheimer kind of, stepping out of the line a little bit. And I think this is something that separates him a little bit from Jason Garrett, because I think Jason Garrett would be the kind of guy that would just be, I hate the meme of him clapping and being excited, but this should be Garrett clapping and say, hey, this is great team effort. I'm so excited to see this. What a win. I love everybody. And look, it was a gutsy effort. That's whatever the criticism of the Dallas' performance, and we'll get to some of it very short order. It was one of the gutsier performances I've seen. I think last season in 2024, their gutsiest win was against Tampa, with the getting eliminated from the playoffs and the injuries, of course. They just found a way to win. I think this, in terms of just a heart team performance, is better than that. I think this is probably the gutsiest win since, I feel like, the Bengals week 2 in 2022. I think that's the only game that I think comes close to this, just because it felt like a game where the Cowboys were definitely going to lose, because they were just, it felt like, to be totally honest, remember, I think it was in 2011 where they blew that double-digit lead against the Giants and lost 37 of 34, whether it was a 300-yard passing game surrendered by the Detroit Lions, or against the Detroit Lions, the Calvin Johnson 300-yard receiving game, excuse me. A lot of people talk about that after the game. It felt like one of those games where, like, and we've all seen it in the Cowboys the past couple of decades, it was their game. They were going to lose it. And I think most of us watching the game probably felt that they're just going to lose this. They don't have an answer. Their strategy is dumb. Their execution is terrible. It's the Giants' day. Russell Wilson's playing out of his freaking mind, and they found a way to get it done. But they have to clean up some things, and I think this is a shot across the bow to Eberflus and the defensive staff, saying, guys, we got to have a better plan. We got to have a better execution. We got to do something. I mean, we can't have, I think 7 pass plays of 25-plus yards in a game, right? That's absolutely bonkers. I think this is a good move by Schottenheimer, again, sending the message to his staff very early on. We got a lot of crap to clean up, because this is totally unacceptable. All right, getting to the other big news of the day that happened, actually, I guess, allegedly during the game, was the addition of Javon Clowney with the Cowboys, as per Tom Pelissero. He posted 3-time Pro Bowl defensive end Javon Clowney is signing with the Cowboys. Owner Jerry Jones tells reporters it's a big win, and now some help coming for a defense that needs it. But by the time of this recording, I'm recording this at about 5:30 in the morning. They say it's a 1-year deal worth up to $6 million. There were some rumors that it was going to be like a 2-year deal. I guess they ironed it out to just be a 1-year contract. Nothing's been officially publicized yet. So, I mean, right now it's just basically word of mouth, although there's no reason to doubt the word of mouth when it comes to contract stuff. Negotiations, usually, agents usually leak that out when it's, set in stone just to, get ahead of the publicity. Look, they need help at the pass rush. I think one of the things that was very clear, the pass rush wasn't there. And what the Giants did, and it was a great game plan. I'll give Dable a lot of credit because they run a little bit of a different concept. So in modern NFL, a lot of teams like to use, 11 personnel under center, right? That's that Shanahan, that's that McVay, a lot of play action, bootleg, and trying to run the football and play action, move the quarterback, right? All that kind of stuff, right? Even the Eagles, who play a lot out of gun, find that similar kind of concept, right? That's just, the Chiefs play that too, right? That's just modern football. You want a bunch of tight ends, a lot of motion and shifting. What the Giants do, they're much more, kind of older New England Patriots. If you look at, for example, the 2007, 2009 era Patriots, obviously Dable has some connections to the team, is that they play spread, and they spread the field out, right? And it's a little bit different than the way most teams play it. And if you look at offense these days, and if you look at what the New York Giants were able to do, is they essentially bet, listen, the Cowboys are decimated with injuries. DeRon Bland is out, right? We know a lot of their backups are out. We know the Giants, have some good receivers. Neighbors is a stud. Wan'Dale Robinson's a good player. Slayton is a veteran player who's been around the block. Russell Wilson throws a beautiful deep ball. What if we just spread them all out and we just flood the zone vertically, and we don't think their pass rush can get there? And guess what, guys? It couldn't, right? And that was one of those things. It reminded me a lot of that Packers defeat in the postseason, where the Packers had a little bit of opposite mindset, but they said, listen, we're just going to go mass protect and flood the zone, right? With just basically 2-man route combinations. And Jordan Love's going to make some incredible throws. And Jordan Love did, right, before the pass rush could get there. And it was a lot of great design as well from the Packers, a lot of poor execution from the Cowboys defensively. Same kind of vein here for Dallas. It was it wasn't a spammy kind of performance for the Giants, but it was one of those things where if you have Micah Parsons on your team, or a really good pass rusher, and you run those vertical concepts as much as the Giants did, you're getting sacked 5-6 times a game. You're just going to get killed, right? You just are. They're great designs, they're great strategies, but teams usually don't like running it because you're having your quarterback sit in the pocket for 3.5 seconds and launch it deep. Oh my goodness gracious. A lot of times you're going to get just killed. And that's what the Giants did with grand success against Dallas. And Russell Wilson, to his credit, threw great footballs, but there just wasn't enough pass rush. And I think this is clearly a move that the veteran Dante Fowler has not done good enough. He's not stepping up to the plate. And Ezra Raku's he's not ready yet, right? He's getting reps. It's going to be a process, but it's going to take some time for Ezra Raku to figure it out. I think Diggy Zua and Clark are doing their part inside, at least decent enough. They just need more help from the outside edge rushers. I think Williams is doing okay, right? I think Nealon didn't have much of a game yesterday, but it's, in terms of rushing the passer, they definitely need pass rush help. Eberflus isn't a big blitzer, and Clowney's the guy that can come in and give them some of that. So Houston had a nice day too. Got the Cowboys, one of the few Cowboy sacks, one of 3 Cowboy sacks. So again, I look at a guy like Clowney as a really good addition because schematically it's clear the Cowboys have issues rushing the passer. All right, let's get into the game itself. So let's pull up the team stats. And what was very interesting about this game, and I'll just kind of bounce around here looking at the team statistics here, is that although it was obviously a very close, very thrilling back and forth game, it looked like the Cowboys, they took the lead in the third quarter after the Giants started strong, and then they kind of held that lead until the final, until the back and forth fourth quarter. So it was really kind of a back and forth crazy game. I think there were 6 ties or lead changes in fourth quarter overtime. There was somebody that was saying that it was tied for the most in NFL history. So again, we're talking about, this is an all-time game kind of thing right here. So this is something that's anomalous. And so the fact that the Cowboys were able to win sort of an all-time kind of game, a credit to them. It was a back and forth game. And it's one of the things that's different than, say, the 2020 Week 2 comeback against Atlanta. Atlanta dominated that game for 3+ quarters, right? Physically better. The Cowboys had a fake punt that didn't work, got stopped on 4th down. It was just, the Atlanta Falcons were better for 3.5 quarters, and then Dak Prescott got crazy hot. They got the onside kick. It was just a crazy game that the Cowboys pulled out. This was sort of a back and forth struggle, basically the entire affair. So again, it wasn't like a avoided collapse and avoided disaster. This was just a crazy game, certainly a crazy second half. But if you look at the numbers here, on a snap-by-snap basis, the Cowboys were physically better than the Giants, right? First downs, 32-22. Third down, about the same, 6 of 14. Fourth down, Cowboys got a big fourth down stop. The Cowboys converted a fourth down. Tolbert with a nice catch. He did have a bad drop and did get tackled on an opportunity to make a big play in overtime, but he did have that big fourth down catch. So sort of a mixed bag from Tolbert there. In terms of yards per play, I mean, you can see right there just the big plays across the board. I mean, just absolutely monster from the New York Giants. They big played Dallas, and if you look at the red zone, you can see there that's clutch defense stepping up, 1 for 5, 1 touchdown and 5 red zone attempts, held them to 3 field goals and a fourth down stop. Cowboys 3 for 3 in the red zone. That's the Schottenheimer effect right there. That's the difference between Schottenheimer and Mike McCarthy, and that's A+ there. Running the football, Sanders, Williams, great job there. Of course, Pickens with the touchdown late. Penalties, right? The first half, it was all penalties against the Giants that were giving the Cowboys an advantage. And the second half, and it was really the penalties came against the Dallas Cowboys. It was crazy how that ended up working out against the Cowboys. That offensive pass interference on Pickens in overtime, one of the worst offensive pass interference calls I've ever seen, especially for a penalty that isn't called very much in today's National Football League. You never see that. I mean, it was the most ticky-tack thing you could possibly imagine. And they called it, and it turned a 3rd and a foot and 2nd and 29. I mean, it was a potential game-ending play either side of the coin for the Dallas Cowboys. Obviously, getting a 2nd and 29, that's hard to come back from. And then you look at, of course, basically giving the football back to New York. At that perspective, the way they've been moving the football could have ended the game there. So, a way to overcome that. That was, to me, that's one of the worst calls of the entire game. But in terms of officiating, I thought it was a very poorly sloppy game from both teams. Obviously, I thought the officials actually were not terrible until that moment. I thought it was an okay officiated game. I thought the New York Giants tried to come in and be very, very physical and tough. They wanted to come in defensively. They wanted to come in and hit you, and they wanted to be a physical, handsy team. They felt like that was the best way to slow down Dallas's offense. And in some ways it worked. They got some hits on the quarterback. They did decent enough in run defense. But when you play that aggressive and play that kind of man coverage, I know people sit there and say Cowboys need to play more man coverage. The problem is when you don't have the corners, and right now very few teams have the corners can match up against CeeDee Lamb and Pickens, obviously, it's that you're going to get some pass interference calls. You're going to get a lot of them. And so the Giants got a lot of them. And so, look, it was a pretty even game, 14-12 from the penalty perspective. Turnovers, 1 apiece, time of possession clearly in Dallas's favor. And that's with like the first, 20 minutes of the game. I think the Giants had the ball for like 16 or 17 minutes. So the fact that the Cowboys came ahead on the time of possession game speaks to how basically after the first quarter, the Giants it became a big play offense, right? Their offense was these huge plays. Now, that's not saying the Giants didn't execute well and the Cowboys defense played well. They didn't. But I think it's important to understand that on a snap-by-snap basis, the Cowboys physically did a pretty good job. If you look at rushing, for example, I want to highlight that. The Giants had 84 rushing yards on 21 attempts. Considering 15 of those yards came on a scramble by Russell Wilson, you're looking at 20 carries for 69 yards. A little quick math, that's 3.5 yards per carry. That's a good job. So again, we're talking about a run defense here that stepped up for the second straight week. Quarterback runs excluded. You're talking about just ordinary runs. The Giants had that one run with Scatterbo with Jackson Dart in the game. Kind of a good design from the Giants and poorly played by Dallas. But outside that one pop, it's like a 25, 24-yard run, something like that. I mean, the Giants couldn't do anything on the ground all game long. So physically, the Cowboys' run defense, with the addition of Kenny Clark and Matt Eberflus's scheme, credit where credit is due, back-to-back weeks, they've done a pretty good job. So run defense that was so disastrous last year has completely, like I talked about in the offseason, the goal was bringing in Eberflus and then, of course, trading for Kenny Clark, and the changes schematically was to go from being a disaster in run defense to competent. And they've become competent through 2 weeks. So that's something definitely to be positive about. All right, let's get into the offensive numbers here. This is, I think, a lot of good stuff here to look at. Prescott, 30-52 for 361, 2 scores, 1 pick. It's one of those things where they didn't big play New York, right? It was very methodical. And I thought that was very interesting. I think they had 2 big plays, and you can see on the bottom there, you had CeeDee Lamb with that long 33-yard completion and Pickens with a 27-yard completion. Of course, there were some pass interference penalties. Pickens, I tell you what, this guy, 5 catches for 68 and a score. He's a legit dude, right? And I think he's slowly becoming, I mean, you talk about the number 2 receiver, phenomenal, right? This is what you want, because basically if teams want to try and double and figure out a way to, rotate coverages to CeeDee Lamb, if you leave Pickens one-on-one and man on coverage, he'll either embarrass you or he'll draw a penalty. And we saw that down the stretch. He had a phenomenal performance. Williams had a great day, 18 for 97, that 30-yard touchdown, ran hard. Miles Sanders, again, ran hard, touchdown run in there. Again, I know a lot of people waiting to see Jaden Blue, and I think we'll see him sooner rather than later. Looks like he's getting closer. I think it's very interesting. Cavante Turpin with the injury left early, had some nice touches. Had, of course, the touchdown, 4 catches, 47 yards, and score, and 2 rushes for 6. Get him involved in the offense. I think using him a lot in motion. I think he's a weapon. Right now, I think, as they said after the game, his x-rays were negative in terms of anything disastrously bad. So whether he's going to be available for week 3 for Chicago, I think that's up in the air. No reporting yet, but it sounds like he avoided anything really bad. So if he does miss just the Bears, that it seems like it'd be just a short-term issue. The injury to Cooper Beebe, the center, of course, we're waiting for updates over the next day or two. That probably seems like a multi-game kind of injury and going to rely on Brock Hoffman going forward, but we'll see what happens with that. But again, physical, good team. If you take away the 15-yard run from Dak Prescott, or what I think it was 14, but whatever we'll call it, 15 in overtime, the Cowboys still ran for $120. Right. So again, from a physical perspective, we've seen running the football. Cowboys were better than the Giants. Stopping the run, the Cowboys were better than the Giants. Right. In terms of, they did surrender 3 sacks. So in terms of pass pro, it was a little iffy there. But to be fair, if you have 55 dropbacks, you're going to get some sacks. It's just the reality of the situation. And this is a defense from the New York Giants that is fully locked into their front four. And they got a good front four. Brian Burns, they traded for him. He is a stud. Lawrence is an absolute stud. Thibodeau is a former top 10 pick who's a talented guy who's a good football player. Not a superstar, but a good, solid football player. And of course, Abdul Carter, their young top 10 pick, looks like a superstar. So just to be clear, they've got 2 all-pro guys and 2 top 10 picks, right? They invested a lot in this front four. And it's a good front four. And the Cowboys did just enough to hold up and win. Let's get into the defensive stats here. It's going to be a little uglier. But I'm going to talk about the second and third guy here from the top, Sanborn and Murray. I thought Sanborn, except with the exception of that long run with Scatterbo, played well. I thought Murray had a terrible F- first quarter and then a B plus the rest of the 3 quarters. And people forget, he had a big tackle on a 3rd down to force a punt, had a nice tackle for loss. And in overtime, the play before the interception, he helped blow up a screen for a 3-yard loss. So again, Murray, after a really bad first quarter and a really bad Phillies game, turn it around with, I think, we haven't seen the film yet, of course, but it looked like a really good second, third, and fourth quarter for Dallas defensively. It's for him. So a good step forward there. Solomon Thomas coming off the bench had a nice day. Donovan Wilson had a day to remember, and then for 4+ quarters. It was one of those games where I don't know exactly what the coverage scheme was because it was so, in terms of the nitnoids, right? Because there were multiple instances where, Trayvon Diggs, I think twice was expecting inside help and he never got it. Now, is that a Diggs thing? I think part of it is on Diggs. I think Diggs is sort of, coming back from the injury, right? A lot more put on him than was expected because of Deron Bland being out, and there's just all kind of miscommunication issues. My guess was the Cowboys came into this game trying to play a lot of 2 high, a little cover 2. But then the Giants, with that spread attack and the struggles to defend those seams, they just said, all right, we're just going to cover 3 to cover the seams, and we're going to bring Malik Hooker down to support our backup nickel corner, Reddy Stewart, in those situations. So Donovan Wilson, you're going to be our center fielder. And boy, that was a disaster. I think there was at least 3 of these huge completions. The 2 of them one to Robinson, 1 to Neighbors, and 1 to Neighbors at the end, where Wilson just took a bad angle. Now, I will say, in the defense of Donovan Wilson here, especially on some of those were perfect throws. So one of the things you have to coach if you're a defender, if you're a defensive back, is like, well, do you try and defend the perfect throw, or do you try to defend the normal throw? And Russell Wilson, he threw, these were beautiful throws, in stride. A lot of times on these deep balls, like these receivers, they got to slow up, or they have to dive, or it has to be a 50-50 ball or something like that. These were not the cases. These were right in stride, perfect throws, especially a couple of these deep ones down the stretch, especially that late one to Neighbors. So I'm going to give credit where credit is due. Russell Wilson had a phenomenal game. But Donovan Wilson, I think, was just out of position on a lot of them. And a couple times he was completely out of position. And now, whether that was Diggs or whether that was Wilson, I kind of feel like it was more Wilson, and here's why. Even on that last completion to Neighbors and at the end of the fourth quarter, with Elam was in coverage stride for stride, but he's outside leverage, and the ball was thrown inside. So he obviously, he tried to make the play coming over the top, but couldn't make it. It was a great throw, good catch. But if you have outside leverage in that sort of cover 3 look, you're expecting safety help to be there to basically make the play or deliver a striking blow right on contact, right? You're expecting safety help, especially for the deep shot. We saw that with Elam there, and the safety wasn't there. Wilson wasn't there to make the play. Diggs, in a couple instances, the safety wasn't there to make the play. So I think Donovan Wilson just should not be the center field safety. And I understand they probably rolled Malik Hooker down to kind of help with the Reddy Stewart, who was playing nickel corner in that situation. But boy, that strategy did not work at all. All right, let's get into some comments after the game I thought were interesting. This is from Joseph Hoyt. Dak Prescott said multiple defenders apologized to him in the locker room after the game. He told them not to apologize. He then cited how he threw an interception in the game, and Joe, the defense, responded with the stop. I think that's a typo there. I don't know why Joe Hoyt put the word Joe in his post, but I guess he was just trying to rapidly respond. Basically, he threw a pick and the defense got a stop. He said it's a complimentary game, Prescott said. Yeah, that's a great point. So what was interesting about this game, so let's go back to 2021 Week 2. The Cowboys, coming off a loss to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, played the Los Angeles Chargers, right? Chargers, kind of not sure how good or bad football team they were. I think they were a solid football team that year. Staley, their head coach, turned out to not be a good head coach, but they had some good players. That was a game where the Cowboys held the Chargers to 17 points, right? But they did it without forcing a single punt. They got 2 picks, right? 2 interceptions, and they got, I think, they helped them to 3 field goals, if I remember correctly. Yeah, 3 field goals, right? So it's one of those games where it's like, okay, no punts, 3 field goals, 2 interceptions, right? So you look at that and say, okay, so you have if we go 2 interceptions, and I think we'll call that 5 stops. We'll say 3 field goals, 2 picks. And then if you look at the Giants game, which again, 37 points, a disastrous performance, they held them to 3 punts, 3 field goals, and an interception. So on a stop basis, it was actually better than it was that Chargers game. Now, I'm not saying they played better as a team, but it can be a little misguided. Of course, you consider now the 4th down stop as well. So you look at really the Cowboys, 3 punts, a 4th down stop, 3 kicks, right? And now we look at the interception. You're saying 8 stops? I mean that's a lot of football. And one of those things that can happen, I think, is that, especially when you're not having your day defensively, to minimize the damage. And I think for the first 3 quarters, the defense did a phenomenal job doing that. I think the collapse in the 4th quarter was disastrous, but credit needs to be given to them getting that 4th down stop. Again, run defense, pressure on the quarterback. Murray was there to help break up the play on 4th down after the interception to start. I mean, that could have really tilted the entire game there early in the half. Getting that stop, they got 2 punts, they got a 3 and out, and then they got a punt at the end of the first half, right? Of course, the interception in overtime, the 2 stops in overtime. Again, gutsy performance, right? So again, you give up that collapse of a big play at the end of regulation. You get 3 straight touchdown drives, I think. So it's just you're just having a disastrous game. But then in overtime, what do? You get a stop, you force a punt, and then you find a way to get an interception after Murray gets a tackle for loss. So gutsy performance, bad performance defensively, right? We're talking D performance defensively. If they can be in the run game, C minus in the pass rush game, F minus in the coverage department. Overall, call it a D. But they found a way to be gutsy and make plays and win the game. That's what it comes down to. And I think that's what Prescott's trying to say here. All right, this happened before the game, but I want to cover this. This was Cowboys and guard Tyler Smith reached agreement on a 4-year, $96 million extension. And then Smith, I think, played pretty well. I mean, I haven't seen the footage, but it seemed to be doing a good job for the Dallas Cowboys. Look, I think it was clear to me that the Micah Parsons overhang was distracting them from a lot of other deals, right? They're spending a lot of effort on Parsons because literally the moment the Parsons deal kind of goes away, lock up Ferguson, lock up Bland, lock up Tyler Smith. They had already locked up Turpin and Odighizuwa in the offseason. It seems like Brandon Aubrey's probably next on the list. We'll have to see what happens this year with Pickens. So far through 2 games, I think he may be worth an extension, but small sample size. So right now we're looking at a Cowboys team that with the Parsons overhangs gone, they're locking down all their good players, which means they're going to go into next offseason with the draft picks. Of course, 2 extra first-round picks next year and the following year, 1 each. So 2 picks and 2 first-round picks in each of those next 2 drafts. And then, of course, extra cap space. So we're seeing the Cowboys, again, kind of clear the deck early, doing some good front office moves here, which makes me think how much the Parsons overhang was really draining resources. So good job here from the Cowboys locking this down. All right, and this was kind of just a good tidbit here to end on the news. This is also courtesy of John Machota post-game. He said, Cowboys coach Brian Schottenheimer declined to share what Dak Prescott said in the locker room before giving the game ball. He said, if I try to spit it out, I'd cry, and I don't feel like crying right now. So I think there's 2 big takeaways, I think, when I look at Schottenheimer with the Dallas Cowboys. And he is essentially what Jerry Jones wanted Jason Garrett to be, where the players love him, the players adore him. He's a no nonsense guy. He's not. I mean, I mentioned earlier. He said we did a lot of dumb crap tonight, right? He's kind of a he's an honest guy. He's an authentic guy. He's a smart offensive mind, right? So all the things that Jerry Jones wanted Jason Garrett to be, Schottenheimer is. And on the flip side, Schottenheimer is a guy that is truly appreciative. I mean, he's a guy who loves what he's doing. He's definitely clarity of purpose kind of guy. Now, I don't know if either of those two things will lead to a lot of wins. I don't know. But if you talk about for the first time since, when's the last time the Cowboys had a coach where the players were fully bought in and the coach was fully bought in at the same time, right? And we're really committed and really truly, like, we're really bought into each other. And I had to think, I'm like, well, not Mike McCarthy. I mean, I thought the players liked McCarthy, but it wasn't a superb relationship there across the board. Not Jason Garrett for sure, not Wade Phillips for sure. Bill Parcells maybe in some respects. But again, that maybe, I guess maybe Parcells, but certainly not Campos, certainly not Gailey, certainly not Switzer. I mean, so again, maybe you're looking at Jimmy Johnson and Bill Parcells. And if that's the company that Schottenheimer's in, I know it's early, it's 2 games. We'll have to see what happens. No guarantee of any more wins or anything good to happen, of course. But it's good company to be in terms of what he's doing and his fit and with the locker room, the players, and just everything going on with just the mojo of the team right now. So again, there's a lot to get better on. This Cowboys team has a whole lot of flaws, undeniably so. But I think you have to look at what Schottenheimer is doing and what the players are bought into. They're bought into Schottenheimer, and Schottenheimer's bought into them fully and committedly. So that's I think a good sign, because we haven't seen that, in my opinion, since probably Bill Parcells, maybe even since Jimmy Johnson, if we're being honest. All right, let's get into some of the comments yesterday. I did a rapid reaction. I don't know if I'm going to do that going forward, but I wanted to try it right after the game. If it doesn't work out, then I'll just do the daily show, right in the morning before the game. This first one is from member David Dobbins, 5887. Again, if you're a member, I will always shout out your comment every single time. You'll also be the first people that are mentioned in the comments when I go over the comment section. So become a member. It helps me out, and you'll always get shouted out. But anyway, this is from David Dobbins, who I greatly appreciate. Defense. Leg injuries take a year, and Diggs is another example, and Overshown will probably be the same. Elam was traded for a reason. New defensive schemes always take a while. Fowler was let go for a reason. More Houston and Eberflus needs to watch blitz film. Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point, right? Trayvon Diggs is coming back from multiple injuries last year. He had no training camp, right, really, to speak of. He did some practice, was on sort of a pitch count in week 1, and then this was sort of his first feet to the fire moment in tough situations in week 2, and he did not play well. But in his defense, he is coming back from injury, right? There is going to be some issues, some challenges, even if it's just communication and playing in space in a new scheme. Like, okay, when this defensive call is made, can I really expect help? Can I not expect help, right? It's going to take some time. When you play a lot of man coverage, like Diggs has in the past, you can kind of figure it out and say, okay, I'm man on man in this situation, right? I know what I need to do. But if you're playing zone, you rely on spacing, timing. It's more of an 11-man game, as Diggs himself has said. So I think there are some issues with that, and certainly coming back from the injury. Elam, again, Kyrie Elam was brought into Dallas to basically try and compete to be a backup corner, right? That, again, when we talk about, and I've made this point a lot during the offseason and during training camp, I said, listen, September's going to be rough, because if you look at the Cowboys' long-term plan at corner, it's Bland, it's Diggs, it's probably Revel, to be totally honest, and then it's a battle between like Butler and Carson and Elam to who's the number 4 corner, right? Or you can make an argument it's a battle between all those guys who's number 3 corner. Instead, Elam is basically getting a lot of reps as if he's the number 1 corner right now with Bland hurt. So again, it's not just that Deron Bland is hurt, it's that the Cowboys have no depth, right? They had Reddy Stewart. He's basically, no offense here for Reddy Stewart, he's a waiver wire pickup. Right? He's a practice squad guy, essentially, who was playing a lot of snaps. They had Bridges in the game, right? A rookie playing a few snaps. Again, so this was a situation where it was like, listen, we got to get bodies out there and see what can happen. Remember, when you have depth injuries and depth issues, Butler, Revel, of course, Carson, when you have 3 guys with these kind of injuries, you just have to throw bodies out there, and you have to kind of come up with defensive schemes to try and help them. And I think that Eberflus tried to do that, but it just put guys like Elam in bad positions. It created communications issues. Not a well-called game from Eberflus's perspective. And this secondary, with their injuries, they've got problems. But thank you for the comment. Really appreciate it. All right, the next comment here is from The Hereafter 100. He says, as much as I despise your pessimism, you are absolutely right so far. Thank you. September has proven to be shaky, and we're looking like the cardiac Cowboys. I have said both those things multiple times. Missing Micah was glaring, and the Bland injury was huge. The defense was horrific, but to the credit, they tightened up in overtime. Yeah, I think it's one of those things where it was very clear, like in coming in, and I mentioned this coming into the season. I said, listen, there are 3 areas of this team that are contention level right now for the Dallas Cowboys. This is pre-Micah Parsons trade. Quarterback play, pass catchers, right? The other part was pass rush because of Micah Parsons and the team around them, right? Parsons, Odikizua, and everybody else, but it was led by Parsons. With Parsons gone, this pass rush went from contending type to, I don't know, right? Interior is pretty darn good. Exterior, not so good in terms of the defensive ends, right? And look, anytime you trade away an all-pro, right? If the Cowboys traded away CeeDee Lamb, their pass-catching group would take a massive hit, obviously, right? So it's one of those things to be expected. But a lot of what the Giants did is they just basically said, hey, screw you, we're going to go spread. We know your pass rush isn't good enough, and we'll flood you vertically with a bunch of vertical routes, and we'll put your injury-riddled secondary in a lot of tough positions in a new scheme, and we've got good receivers, and we got a quarterback that throws beautiful deep balls, and we're going to eviscerate you with it. And that's what the Giants did. And to their credit, they did a great job. I don't know how sustainable it is for other teams. I think it's definitely an issue. It's definitely a flaw for Dallas going forward. My goodness. But I think give the Giants credit for a great game plan and great execution. But I do think right now, with the injuries they have in the secondary and Parsons gone, you can see why they're adding Clowney, right? This is a pass rush group that, frankly, just isn't good enough. They need more people there. But like you said, they did make some plays in overtime. They found a way to get it done, right? And that's one of the things that I think is the most important thing. This was a game that I think Dallas lost 5 times, but they found a way to win in the end, which is the most important thing. Let's see here. This is from Pete Gorman, 9547. He said, I want to say there's a lot of concern about Cowboys defense after this game, and I agree. That was definitely a horrible effort by the Cowboys on defense, but I think too many Cowboys fans have gotten into the habit of automatically blaming the coach, no matter who the coach is. And I'm not talking about the host of this channel, thank you, but the comments I've read on other channels who do post-game shows, it's all blaming the defensive coordinator. Eberflus was hired in January. It might take him some time to find what players are going to work in a system on defense, which wants to utilize to make the defense productive. Another thing is when fans instantly blame the coach or coordinator, you aren't holding players responsible. Diggs was awful there today, so was Wilson, yet he had to pick at the end of the game. But Wilson threw it right to him. The players have to make plays. They're the ones on the field, and they get paid to make plays. They can't always fall on the coaching staff. And he says, plus, we know that Eberflus lost his best defensive player week 1 before the game. And by the way, his second best defensive player, DeMarvion Overshown, is hurt, is out, right? So keep that in mind, right? Overshown is a great blitzer. He's a great athletic guy. Without Overshown in the game, I mean, I don't know if Overshown makes a difference against the Giants, but I definitely think he's a guy that if they would have blitzed him, he'd probably get to sack in that game, to be totally honest, and which, of course, would have probably resulted in a stop somewhere. That will be impossible to replace this year. Preseason is fine, but I'm sure he's learning how to utilize certain players after each game. If Eberflus is a good DC, then we should see this defense get better each week and see players get more comfortable with this defensive play calling. If he is a bad DC, then we will see the opposite. Yeah, I do think it's a very good point there, and thank you for the comment. Look, it's one of these things. This is a new staff and new strategy across the board, offense and defense for the Dallas Cowboys. And if you look at teams with new strategies and new schemes and across it, it's not good, right? Teams that have these completely new, completely rehauled. I mean, look at the New Orleans Saints. They're 0-2, right? You look at teams across the National Football League that have new schemes, right? It's that don't have a lot of veteran players, especially injuries, right? There's a lot of teams out there that don't look so good, don't look so clean, right? You have a team, for example, even like the Indianapolis Colts, they're 2-0, surprise 2-0 team. But that structure, that offense, the defense, the coach, the play calling, it's already in place. So they're set up to start strong. They're set up to do some good things. Whereas teams that have new coaching staffs and new offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators, remember the Lions week 1 looked awful. They looked awful. Now again, it's a good Packers team. But again, they lost both coordinators, new scheme. It's going to take some time to work things out. That's just how it works in the National Football League, right? And that is, I think, a fair point with Eberflus. And I think Wilson had a disastrously bad game. Diggs didn't play his best game either, although whether that was his fault or Wilson's or probably both. I mean, I kind of think it was Wilson's, because even when you have Elam did his job, for example, they still gave up the 50-yard touchdown because, again, if you have outside leverage and that kind of zone coverage, you're probably going to get beat inside, right? But it was a perfect throw too. So it's one of those things where if you're Eberflus, you sit there and say Wilson played like garbage. Corners need to work better and communicate better. They need to get a better pass rush, and they also had a quarterback that had like 8 perfect throws. So it's one of those things where if you look back on it, you're kind of like, as a defensive coordinator, okay, we need to get better at pass rush, check. We got to get better at communication, check. And maybe we don't play a quarterback that has the best game he's had best game he's had in a decade every single week. So there's some positives there. As bad as it was defensively, it was Russell Wilson's day 100%. The Cowboys had a bunch of communications issues and not good enough pass rush, and the Giants have good receivers. They just do. That's the strength of their offense by far. And look, it wasn't good. It was bad. But I think there are some things they can move forward on. Really have to see how they do going forward. But we all, like I've talked about before, September going to be rough, going to be shaky with the injuries. All right, let's see here. This is from Albert P. Sykes. Commented, resilience with the injuries. They gritted it out. Giants came in motivated. Matchups make battles. It's never what you think. These are all pros. Yeah, I know. I think that's a great point. One of the things that people always look at is like, well, the Giants aren't very good. Well, I would sit there and say the Cowboys I don't think are world beaters this year either. But the Cowboys, I think, were like a 5-point favorite, which I thought was a little high, but that's what they were coming into the game. This isn't like college where you're a 25-point favorite, right? It's not one of those things. The NFL's not like that. If you look across the National Football League, all these games yesterday were brutally close. Even the games that became blowouts, for example, the Rams over the Titans, the Rams were trailing in that game in the second half. Right now, they pulled away and finished strong, but the Titans, one of the worst teams in football last year, the worst team in football, starting a rookie quarterback. Right, and the Rams are, I think, the second best team. You can make second or third best team in the NFC. You can make an argument with Packers and Philly number one. I think the Rams are number 3 right behind them. I think they're the best team in their division. The Rams were down in the second half against one of the worst teams in football, right? This is the way the National Football League is. There's a lot of close games. Matchups matter. It was one of those things where Dable had a great scheme. The Cowboys personnel with their pass rush couldn't make enough plays. Secondary, again, we covered all that before. Resilience, I agree, though, found a way. And that's what it's about sometimes, just finding a way to win. Glenn Q5W commented, Diggs needs to step up. He got badly beat in 2 touchdown plays. Go Cowboys. I think he definitely played very poorly. I think that's undeniable. But he is coming back from injuries. As Texas Twister 22 commented, he says he's only 75 to 80%. So he should theoretically get better. Thrown to the fire. It was a tough situation. I mean, and he wants to. He says he can play zone, but he's more of a man guy. That's sort of how he likes to play the game. So again, new scheme, new structure. It's going to take some time. And with the injuries at corner and the lack of a pass rush, Eberflus isn't a man guy to begin with. It's going to be interesting how they adjust going forward. This is from Vic Jones 03. Our defense is in trouble. We don't play when we used to play. Houston needs to play more. 41 is getting manhandled out there, and 6 is lost. He can't even cover in zone. Donovan Wilson, yeah, he did not have a good game. DPL Dune commented, you were right on to suggest that the game would be close. Too much talent on New York to fold. Without Aubrey, we lose. 100% correct. Look, there's this weird situation where people look at teams and say, oh, they're not good. They're not a good football team, so they just don't have good players. The Giants have good players. They got one of the best front four. They got a top 10 front four in football. I would argue they could be a top 8, top 5 front four. Right? They got a feisty defense. Right? They did some good things to Jane Daniels in week 1. Right? They've got a good feisty defense. Offensive line wise, look, they've got some issues, but they that's the weak part of their team, and they got great receivers. Right, and they got a good young running back in Scatterbo, so they've got some players. It's one of these things where we think as teams, oh, they were 4-13 last year, but the Giants, they added Russell Wilson, good veteran quarterback. They've got a lot of great playmakers on offense. This is not a bad football team. I said this before the game. Now, will they win a lot of games? I think that remains to be seen. Right, and the NFL's tough. Right, the Cowboys had won 7-10 last year, and they were not a good football team. So it's weird how this thing shakes out. But people that were sleeping on the Giants coming in this game think it was going to be a cakewalk. I mean, that was. They did not watch week 1, because if you watch week 1, you could sit there and say, this is a feisty Giants pass rush. This is a feisty Giants team. And if Russell Wilson can hit the open guys, and he had a bad week 1. He had a terrible week 1 by his standards, even at this point in his career. So he bounced back in a big way in week 2. But credit to the Cowboys, again, finding a way to win. And Ronald West commented here, we'll finish off with this one. I have no confidence in Matt Eberflus's defense for the rest of the season. Yeah, I mean, I think the way the fourth quarter played out, I tell you what, get your, in years past, I think I looked at Cowboys as a team that blew leads, right? Famously, what was it, in 13? They had a huge lead at home against the Packers with Aaron Rodgers out. They lost that one 37-36, right? They, obviously the Calvin Johnson 300-yard receiving game comes to mind. There's a lot of them that come to mind. But with Parsons and the secondary additions they've made over the past 5 years, blown leads haven't happened quite as much. Obviously, there's the one in Jacksonville in 2022. I think that comes to mind. The Packers also in 2022. But they have blown some leads. But I think we're getting back to potentially that 2013, 2012, 2011 era. And look, when you don't have a great pass rush or a great pass rush, that's just what's going to happen. In years past, remember 2023, people talk about the Cowboys saying, oh, they can win because if they go up on you, they got this great pass rush, and they just become a tidal wave. That was really the only way the Cowboys could win. The Cowboys are trying to get to a situation where they can win offensive shootout. They can win a middle of the road game. They can win a physical game. Both teams trying to run the football. Yesterday, they won a shootout, right? In week one, it was kind of a close middle of the road, back and forth kind of game. So we'll have to see what happens going forward. But one of the things that happens when you trade winning one style for, dominating winning one style of football to try and finding a bunch of ways to win, it means you're going to find other ways to lose where otherwise you may have had some blowouts. So again, that's a trade-off, especially as the Cowboys try and build towards the future with their extra cap space and the extra draft picks. So definitely something to keep in mind. But yeah, there's going to be no lead is safe for Dallas this season, especially no matter how much time's on the clock. I definitely saw that yesterday. All right, that's enough of the comments. Got a lot of really great ones, so guys, keep hitting them up in the comment section. Wish I had more time to get to them all, but again, if you want to make sure the comment gets mentioned, become a member. But look, win's a win, guys, and I think there's some people that felt after the Thursday night Week 1 performance felt that was a good loss. There's some people that feel this was a bad win. I think there are such things where, losses where there's reason for optimism, and there are wins for reasons for concern. That being said, a bad win is infinitely better than a good loss in the standings, right? 1%, 100% versus 0% in terms of, winning versus losing. So I think right now, if I'm a Cowboys fan, I think you enjoy this, right? This was a game where you Dak Prescott found a way. CeeDee Lamb, Pickens, their star showed up. Aubrey, their star showed up. Even Kenny Clark inside with the sack, right? He's obviously the best player in their front seven. I think we see that clearly now through the first 2 weeks. Listen, their stars showed up in terms of most of their stars. And look, with the injuries they had, and they just found a way. And I think that's the big thing. Getting a win, getting it done, getting your first one under the book. And look, there's a lot of things to improve on. The addition of Clowney, I think, is a good move. We'll see what happens going forward. Bland's injury, something to keep an eye on. BB's injury, Turpin's injury, a lot of news upcoming in the next week or so as the Cowboys get ready for Week 3. But let's not look ahead to Week 3 yet, guys. Let's enjoy this. We only get so many wins in a season. You only get so many things. And, one of my final points I want to end on today is I remember in 2023, and the Cowboys were winning some blowout games, but I felt like because of the way 2022 ended, just me personally, maybe you guys felt different, that winning became just, it's a relief. Okay, good. They didn't blow it. They didn't blow it against Carolina or blow it against Washington or whatever, right? They didn't blow it against the Chargers or New England or the Jets or whoever they played, right? They didn't blow that game. They won comfortably. Okay, good. And winning became a relief. Not that it wasn't fun to win, but it became just okay, well, that was good. All right, well, what's next week going to be like? Are they not going to blow it? And I think one of the things going forward, and we saw this in 2024, is that, look, winning is hard in the National Football League. And I think we should all take a time to enjoy the victories, enjoy the good performances. Obviously, the Cowboys internally, they're going to find things to work on and improve. Getting a win is always important. Any win is a good win. Any division win is a good win. I don't care how you get it. And the Cowboys got a good division win. Obviously, a tough division loss Week 1. Call it a balance, right? They played better Week 1, played worse Week 2. Hey, listen, you are what your record is. You're 1-1, 500 right down the middle through 2 games. So this Cowboys team, a lot of things to work on, a lot of red flags, but let's enjoy the win, guys. It was a stressful game, but it was a great finish. Credit to Brandon Aubrey for being a clutch player, and we'll see what happens with some of these injury news going forward. But until then, I'm Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection.